that works out when it comes, if that's okay. Okay. Well, it's 11:38. Would y'all like to wait a couple minutes or get started? What feels best for the group? And be mindful of those that rush to get here.
If we're only waiting for Jessica,
I'd say start.
yeah.
Feeling the supervisors
She
are
can jump
used to
in.
being
Yeah,
like.
yes.
She can jump in.
Jessica.
She can-
Mentally
Yeah.
agile.
So we had a kind of I feel like we're zeroing in on product here. So, and maybe like a couple minutes gave you some time too. We put a lot in the packet for you, but we also have this supplemental handout for everybody. From a directional perspective, the, idea, I think as we understood it, was that we wanted to head sort of in a two-pronged approach direction. One with pursuing the development of a policy that this committee could work through with the idea of moving that forward for the April 3rd joint meeting of the CTAC and the Public Outreach Engagement Committee that would then, I guess I'm being presumptuous, but assuming that that joint committee meeting is successful, then it would proceed with a recommendation to the full policy board. And they meet on May 8th. So that's kind of the trajectory that we're heading on. With joint committee approval on April 3rd, that would give staff the, I think, I'll say comfort to incorporate from a budgetary perspective, the financial implications of this pilot policy into the work program that the policy board is also considering on the May 8th meeting. So not only would there be a draft policy moving forward that would guide the how, but there would be the financial resources proposed to be able to support that implementation as a pilot in the coming year. The other item that you'll see listed on the agenda that's included in the packet is this attendance policy, and that felt like that was sort of a companion piece that you all identified, that if we're incentivizing participation in the CTAC, then it felt like we should also have a mechanism to build accountability for participating in the CTAC. So Janice put that together. So those are the two, I'll say, documents that we have for the work group today to review and kind of, I think really the goal would be to have kind of a working session working our way through each of those documents kind of line by line, and we can ink them up. And again, driving toward the objective of having those by the end of today's meeting in a form that are ready to go to the April 3rd joint meeting. You also, as far as we did some staff huddling internally, you all also, I think, agreed that the broader idea of compensation for members of the public, say, who would be participating in different engagement activities, while that feels like a worthy objective, maybe as a second phase of a later attempt after we really move through the policy. I'm seeing some head nodding yes there. So, but it felt like from a process perspective, it would be good. And so Kristen's here today. She put together a lot of the materials that were in your packet to really talk about like what are the things that we're already doing to promote and engage across the region. So we've got that on the agenda too, as I think sort of an educational forum and discussion, if I can, is that right, Kristen? Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
And so there's lots of materials that were included in the packet with regard to that. So does that feel right as far as hitting the kind of key objectives as you all were heading into the meeting?
Yes.
Then I think as time permits, we can lay out our timeline and schedule for how we're going to approach Title VI. I have a couple of announcement kind of updates that I want to make sure that we say to you before we break, but I think if we don't have time to get into a deep discussion on that, we have more meetings scheduled, so we can dive into that in earnest once we clear the part around compensation. Sound good? So again, as always, I want to just say kudos and thanks to Ken. He's really, as you all know, been the chief person putting all this content together. So he drafted this draft policy and circulated it internally, and we had our finance team look at it. I reviewed it. I did make some editorial recommendations, moving away from the terminology of compensation. I think that's like, I think I've been clear, that's like a trigger word almost for me or something. So I did some Googling and thought maybe the term honorarium would be potentially a more descriptive term of what it really is that we're talking about. I'll just share from a background perspective, we have been briefing both the commission and the policy board that this is coming so that they're not surprised. We've been briefing them about the existence of the equity work group, its origin founded in the bylaws of the TPO, and its composition membered by representatives from both of those, the TPO and the commission organizations. And it's interesting because we've talked about this now, I think at 3 or 4 different policy board and commission meetings. But 3 or 4 with repetition comes paying attention, right? And so at one of our last policy board meetings, I guess it was for March, we had some discussion at the executive committee meeting about, oh, wait, what are we doing? Wait, what we're talking about compensating, well, wait, we don't compensate in other places. Why are we doing it? And so I think I'm glad that we've been priming the conversation a little bit so that they're ready. But again, it got my wheels turning a little bit about, making sure that when people hear compensation, that connotes something different for everybody. And honorarium felt like it was so that's a little bit about why you see maybe a little bit of change in language there. But Ken, that was kind of what I felt like I needed to say at the beginning. Would you like to just give any opening comments about how you put this together, or do you want to dive in? What feels right?
We can just dive right in, Martha.
Okay.
I tried to keep it as brief as we could. Ideally, we'd like to get it down to 2 pages, but I think we've done pretty well to just distill it down. We felt like it was important to just have a purpose so everybody's on the same page there, and lay out some of the benefits of it. And as Martha said, this policy as it's written here is for CTAC, and it's written as a pilot. So, kind of a more narrow scope, but the intent we thought was, let's do it with CTAC. Let's see how this works out. Let's do this for a year, I think is what we wrote in here. And then based on our evaluation, then we can, look at picture of compensation for larger groups and other activities. So that's sort of the approach that we took in putting this together. We included some definitions, just to be clear about that. We work on eligibility, we also try to be clear that we would provide an honorarium in addition to a meal and parking validation, so we work with our finance folks to make sure that we've got the language in there about documentation that, if over $600 is provided to an individual within a calendar year, then they would receive the appropriate tax documentation. Trying to be, pretty much as straightforward as we could be. And again, all this is contingent upon the availability of funds. And we haven't really done a detailed financial analysis to see what the impact would
Yeah, we
be.
didn't include it in the packet because we hadn't thought about it.
I mean, it seems thorough. It seems like you thought of a lot of edge cases for thoroughness. That's
Well,
good.
thank you. Yeah, I'm not an expert on writing policy. I'll say
You did a
that.
great
I just
job.
sort of took a whack at it, if you will. And I think I mentioned to you that we've had some communication with an MPO who's also considering this, and I think I'll borrow some of her outline and so forth that she had as well.
Good.
Yeah. And I think I've mentioned to this group that it seems that we're kind of leading the way, at least among Virginia MPOs in doing this. Although it seems like the more we talk about it, the more interest it's generating, so we may be the first, but we probably won't be the last. Good morning.
Does this feel like I don't want it to be too onerous on staff. Does this feel like? Would you guys speak up if this was like way too much work or capacity taken up for this additional policy?
I feel like we considered that, don't
Yeah.
you, do you feel like, Ken, that could, that considered
Yeah.
in the feedback that you
You
got?
know, the fact that we said that we would make, we're not gonna pay you, we're not gonna give you $50 at the conclusion of every meeting, you know.
That helps.
It would be done quarterly.
Right.
And you know, it would be based on attendance sheet, so we're gonna use some of the existing structures that we have to sort of manage it. There would be some additional record keeping involved for sure. You know, we would have to be more diligent in making sure that everybody signs the attendance register and is indeed present. But with CTAC, you know, you're talking about every other month, so there is time between meetings to work through, you know, some of the particulars there.
And then a question about who the check would be made out to, if we made out to the organization or the individual.
So it depends.
Yeah, it depends, yeah.
So there would have to be some kind of assigned sheet that they, when they're on the.
Yes, I would think that as part of our process, we would get individuals to specify, you know, who are they representing? You know, are they representing themselves as a citizen appointee or are they paid staff for an organization? You know, so we can make that distinction as far as payment.
Yeah, so I mean, if I can use you all as examples, if that's okay, I think it's easier. So I think about you and both of you are citizen appointees from your respective localities that you reside. And so while you have things that you do in your life and that kind of thing, you're coming as an appointee, as a volunteer, a resident volunteer, right? And so as examples, they would fit into that category where the payment would be processed directly to them if they were members of the CTAC. Jessica, you would be an elected official who is fulfilling, if you were sitting on CTAC, your membership on CTAC would be by virtue of fulfilling your role as an elected official, and so you would not be eligible
Correct.
for the payment. Stephanie, I think in the seat that you hold on CTAC is a representative of RVA Rapid Transit. And so the payment, we would presume, unless we were notified otherwise, would be paid to your organization, your employer organization, if it's indeed true that you're fulfilling responsibilities of your job. If that weren't the case, I think we'd be looking for you to tell us that.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're trying to create a really onerous process there. And then Richard, I think you present yet a different example of where
Yeah.
the organization that you actually represent is not your employer.
I see that.
So I think
I could
we would
talk with
again-
ACN, I mean, I don't mind if they get the money, they do great work, and I could also just talk with them about making it part of our membership dues.
that, or I think that the payment could go to your organization if indeed you are in your role as executive director, you know what I mean? So I think we could, again, the group is small enough that we can have that conversation and figure out the capacity in which each member and their alternate are fulfilling. And that feels like that's a one-time conversation in the year. And then the enrollment form, if you will, gets filled out. And then anybody who felt for whatever reason, like they wanted to abstain from enrolling, where because of the way that we're paying, we can't pay you unless you give us that information. So, you know, we're not going to force you to take money from us. We just would probably verify that you were actually abstaining so we could have that in our files. But I think, I mean, for the payments that we process for the members of the CVTA, that's how we've handled it. And it's been pretty straightforward.
So there is precedent.
Yes, Plan RVA processes quarterly payments to members of the CVTA based on, just as Ken described, based on attendance at the meetings that have occurred either for the authority or for the subcommittee, the finance committee, if folks are a member of both. So that Janice processes at the end of the quarter, who was at what meeting. And then passes that to our finance team and they process the payments and it works pretty well. And we've had instances in years where members of the authority have abstained from that program or they've enrolled and, you know, we just adjust the register, if you will, of who's participating in the payment program each year. And then the same note, the same applies, any recipient of funds in excess of $600 would receive that tax statement from us, and it's the responsibility of the organization or the individual to file those forms appropriately with whatever their tax filing obligations are.
Which like. $600 for a meeting that happens every other month, like, that's you're not gonna get that too often.
Right.
Anyway,
The tax threshold.
yeah, and then I think this was written with enough specificity and enough generalness to give you all some leeway, which is kind of what you want in a policy.
That's what we were trying to do,
Right,
yeah.
so good job on that.
Thank you, yeah.
So 4C seems a little, and maybe I just need clarification because I came in. Individuals will not be eligible for payment of an honor. So if participating in the community or the committee as part of a compensated work, so are you not compensated for your work?
Right, no, of course I
So, no, I'm just saying,
Right.
so,
Yeah, so this would be where we want to make clear. So I think what we're striving to say here is that
so the organization would get.
Stephanie's attendance or her alternate's attendance, provided that they're both employees of, I mean, Stephanie's technically the alternate, but
Yeah,
I don't want to overcomplicate it, but she would fall under B.
Okay.
And so we wouldn't also pay her directly. So compensation for Stephanie's attendance would be covered under B.
Okay,
A community organization. You're right, I'm validating this as I'm talking, but
so that's what I guess maybe confused me because I understood that when I read B, but then C
Then
kind
C.
of
Right.
counteracts that a
Yeah.
little bit.
yeah, I think, so maybe some guidance from you all. I think what I'm imagining is there's I think about things like in tabular form, you know, so it's like, there's a table and it's like, here's the classifications that any member might fall under, and they can only fall under one.
Yeah, okay,
So you're either an individual who's getting paid, you're a representative of an organization and that organization's getting paid, or you're ineligible because of, like, you're that case of that ineligible. We wouldn't pay Chesterfield County for that,
no,
yeah.
no, I understand.
So yeah,
I
if there's a
guess-
better, I think we're looking for
Right, we need to.
suggestions for how to
right.
make it
Okay,
clear.
Thank you.
so C is supposed to be
Well-
like for people like me that are,
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
People like Jessica, we can write it in there.
Maybe we'll just say, people like Jessica.
Right, everybody gets paid.
Yeah,
wow, wow.
but thank you, we'll work on that.
No, I just didn't,
Wow.
when, in reading it, I mean, I understood the first two and then this,
Right,
the
right.
third one seems to kind of,
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I think it's like, there's three categories.
okay,
There's the individual, the organization, and the non-eligible, and so maybe maybe can we.
maybe just saying, you know, elected officials or someone, or will get no compensation or something like
Okay.
that, and make it more simplified,
Okay.
and I don't know,
Would there be other people?
Yeah, who else would
yeah, who else falls
Yeah.
under that?
Yeah.
I think planning commission just may fall under that, because we get $75 per month, and I think that's in the state code.
Okay,
And so we're actually getting paid.
because you're fulfilling your duty for
Right.
that, okay.
Right.
So we could say elected or local,
We should make special dispensation for that.
local or appointed officials,
Yeah,
But that
Might-
contradicts itself, because everybody here is. an
appointed,
official
well, maybe like
At the
yeah,
local level.
government.
Yeah, at the-
Local, state
yeah.
level.
at the local, yeah,
Locality.
Right.
locality,
Yeah.
something like, we could work on that language. I think the other one that we were sort of frankly grappling, oh, Andrew's here too. That we were grappling with, and I don't know that Ken, we found a good, I mean, I hate to, my intention isn't to call people out, but to be able to give examples. So VCU is an institution, a community organization that is represented on the CTAC. And originally we had language in here that actually was a little bit clearer that said something around government organizations or public organizations, but
Yeah,
VCU felt like
yeah.
a different animal than a locality. I mean, so they are a public organization, they're they're a state institution, but they're not a locality. So,
Could we say a local or state institution?
well, VCU is a state institution, so
And
do
they
you
should
want
be
them to be
getting,
in it or out?
I would say no. I
Okay,
don't think $200, $300 is gonna make or break anything with VCU.
Right.
I mean, absolutely
but if
true.
it's a
Right.
student that's coming,
Right, right.
then, I mean,
Student,
and
yeah.
investing their time, I mean,
Sure,
I would
sure.
definitely say that they should.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah, I think we wanted to sort of
That's
like
just
be
speaking.
thoughtful, so we,
Yeah.
that was a,
Maybe there could be a clause that just says eligibility requirements are variant. And
Uh-huh.
you could give a couple examples and then similar to the attendance policy, like if there's a discussion that is required. That gives you a little bit more freedom to
Uh-huh.
have like a case by case
Right.
basis.
Okay,
and it may be that in the case of that particular institution, to your point, I'd be willing to wager personally that they would decline because it would cost them more to process the
Right.
receipt of, those kinds of payments, quarterly. And so it may be that in that instance, the individual could, like, as a
Yeah.
student or,
Yeah.
that they, maybe that would be a case where that person
Yeah.
would.
Can we
Personally
use
be
this,
able to-
the student as an example and just read it with the language of C as it is?
Yeah, sure.
So if that student is coming here and they are already getting paid by VCU to participate, they wouldn't get paid under C.
Mhm.
But if they're not, that gives Plan RBA the discretion to pay them
Mhm.
if it's something. And I think that discretion is key if we're looking at kind of all the different organizations and people that do come into this room and work here. It might be a little ambiguous, the language, which is why, like, cause it is maybe just a little bit, but also that ambiguous thank you, ambiguity. Helps, gives you guys like that discretion over and the scenarios that play out here.
didn't mean to.
No,
No, this is good, this is why we're here.
Why?
Yeah.
This is exactly what we
I
want
walk
here.
in my coat case.
did you send the document to Andrew? Cause he won't have it. Andrew, I just realized we're all looking at a handout that was here in physical format for everybody, and so Janice is gonna email you a copy. We're looking through the draft policy for payment to members of the CTAC.
Yes, and I did want to say I'm very sorry for not being there.
No worries.
Without too many details, I've been through quite a week and my housing situation is not currently stable, so I'm not really able to go to like in-person meetings in places.
I'm so sorry that you're going through a difficult time. This is exactly why we offer the virtual, so that we
Yeah.
can still get the value of your contribution, but
Great
please
way to
know
overcome
that,
barriers to participation.
yeah. Well, please know that we'll be thinking about you, and if you need to be in and out of this conversation, we completely understand. So
Okay,
thank
thank
you
you.
for
Of course.
being here with us. We appreciate
Yeah.
it.
And thank you for saying that. I would love to get that document by email and read over it and then join the conversation in a second.
It'll be in your inbox as soon as the cyber gods allow it.
Thank you so much.
So we could work through, I think, A, B, and C and try to shore that up a little bit.
Yeah.
Would that sound good to folks?
And if it's a pilot, I mean,
Right,
it's okay if it's not like
yeah.
We learn as we
the
go.
most
Right.
perfect thing
Right.
ever, it is. You know. It's better than it was, if, perfect should not be the enemy of
Right,
good,
right.
so. And none of us are lawyers here, to my knowledge, so,
Correct.
Yeah.
thought so.
That's
Thank
good.
Sorry, I always forget that this is live stream. I need to be. You all make it so easy to be comfortable. Do I don't wanna close the conversation early, but it feels like I'm hearing that the work looks pretty reflective of where you all wanted to see it go, and this is ready to move on.
Definitely.
And so this is going to be moving forward into that April 3rd. meeting.
Yes,
Right.
for the joint meeting of,
To be
yeah.
approved.
So I think one thing that we would love to do, I mean, Ken, I'm gonna speak for you again.
Sure.
I'm sorry for doing that. I mean, I think we're happy to support in any way, but in keeping with what I perceive to be the spirit of this working group, this is your work product. So how would you like it to be presented at that joint meeting? Staff can do it, but do you prefer that it be more of a presentation from the working group?
This is the policy board?
This is the first to the April 3rd joint committee meeting. And Andrew, certainly in your capacity as chair of the CTAC, I invite your wisdom on how you'd like to see it presented.
I mean, I did not hear how you presented it this morning, but assuming this is a continuation of the work from last time we met, I think either you or Ken would be totally like, I think the way that you presented it made a whole lot of sense. If it would help for me to be part of that presentation as CTAC chair, or, and I'm so sorry, I don't remember who the chair of the other committee is.
And maybe.
Okay, I guess since he's not in the working group, that would make a little bit less sense, but if it would make sense for that to be part of it as well, would be more than happy to participate in that presentation.
Jessica's got something to say.
So, no, I'm just thinking because I am the one person for sure that wouldn't be, monetary, maybe I'm a more neutral person to give this presentation because it doesn't benefit me. And I think coming from you, it might actually look like, you're doing this for your benefit.
Self-serving.
It's self-serving to you as a CTAC member, so I don't want it to appear like that. And so I want to make sure that we show it as we are honoring your guys' time. And this was something that was very important that, and why we're gonna try this to see if it'll improve, attendance and if we will get better outcomes. And that's the point of having a pilot. I mean, just to see where we end up. And I think that it's very important to value people's time and energy and but anyway, that's just me personally. I have nothing to
Yeah.
gain from it, so.
It's a good perspective. What do others think?
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding. I think we just got by consensus nominated to, and Ken can be your support.
Okay.
And
Okay.
you know, where did this?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right,
So
right.
some of the work and the.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
You've
Yeah.
got the
So,
voice.
yeah, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Okay,
we'll plan on that.
Would
okay.
it make sense to frame it in terms of Jessica making the initial presentation and then Ken, who is obviously familiar with the nitty-gritty details, sort of coming in behind that and saying, like, here are the details, here's the nitty-gritty on what this looks like. That way it's framed as this is a product of an equity working group, here's why we're doing it, and then the staff can say, here's the sentence by sentence or whatever level of
Sounds like a
detail we
plan.
want.
Yeah,
Excellent.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
well, thank you all. Janice is just right on time handing out, and I think probably Andrew, you have it in email, I hope. This is the companion piece, the draft attendance policy. Which, I'll let you hand it out to everybody, but I think we all remember and know where this, the why and where this came from, but Janice, when you're ready, do you want to give a little bit of background and or Ken on where this, how this was developed?
From the discussions at the last meeting, it seemed like that the group was very interested in making this a part of moving forward with the honorarium policy and wanted to get an idea of how the CTAC attendance goes and so that we could possibly look at changes in the future. And so the policy was discussed and basically I just sort of picked some numbers, I've got the 2 consecutive CTAC meetings under item 3 for when a member fails to attend. And then if they fail to attend, 3 in a calendar year. So I tried to incorporate what we discussed last time, which was that, communicating with staff to, to let us know when they're not going to attend is kind of important. And left it up to, this again was from the last meeting discussion, that if any of these things happen, it doesn't mean that there's no immediate consequence. It just means that it may trigger a conversation between staff and the agency, or locality that the member represents.
So Janice, will it be left up to the person, if they're not there at the time of attendance being taken, it will be up to them to come in and correct you if you don't see them coming in? Cause I know that happens sometimes in our meetings where you take attendance and then
Mhm.
people come wandering, like Mr. Roscoe or something.
Go ahead. Yes, I mean, definitely, if someone comes in and I don't pick it up and they see it the next, if they don't, they won't know that I didn't pick up their attendance. If they see that in the next meeting minutes, which with CTAC, we do formal minutes
Okay.
that the members receive.
Yeah.
Then they would definitely want to let me know
Okay.
that, they're marked as absent when really they were present.
I'm just saying the onus should fall on them to be responsible too, if they are late or whatever, yes? I mean,
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, and we would, I'm sure when we went about introducing this policy, we'd explain that to them,
Okay.
this means that we'll be looking back at
Yes.
these minutes.
Yeah.
And,
Verify
so
your
please make
feedback,
sure you
yeah.
look at the previous minutes in each packet and make sure you're listed correctly.
Okay.
Any feedback? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that, one of the things that we included in our compensation policy is that attendance virtually does constitute attendance, and you notice in the attendance summary that we're classifying or recording in present with an X and virtual with a V.
Mhm. And that's the past, I believe I did 12 meetings. I did an entire, I think, fiscal year.
Yeah, I think we went two fiscal years from 2023.
Oh, if I did,
Forward, yeah.
no, let's see, 1, 2, 3.
If this is the date,
Uh-huh.
so
And we received notification, this week of two
2 new members.
members,
Mhm. Yep, from Hanover County. Well, Mr. Rasnick got
Right.
reappointed, but Mr. Waddell. So we've already got cross pollination happening.
Will this be distributed
Right.
or is this
The
just for
roster.
us to see?
It just, I think, well,
Okay. Cool.
yeah,
It's technically, I mean, this is on the website in individual minutes for each CTAC meeting. But I don't know that we would post anything to sort of highlight, hey, we're looking at who hasn't been attending. But all of these minute attendances are out there for each meeting.
You could say, and that's like half.
Yes, right.
6.
I mean, if we're gauging reactions to this, I want to say that this policy draft looks like exactly what we talked about last time, and it makes complete sense to me.
great.
Yeah.
Do the thresholds seem acceptable to everybody, i.e. 2 for notification and 3 for an inquiry?
3 for calendar.
So-
Seems like two consecutive.
Right, two
So
consecutive,
if
right,
Two
yeah.
meetings in
Without-
one,
right.
then that kind of triggers
Yeah.
a conversation as well
Right.
as
Or
in
3.
general 3 of this.
In a calendar year.
Right.
So what I'm saying, I was wondering maybe because
Fiscal
these
year.
seem kind of duplicative, maybe you could make one thing that says if you miss 2 consecutive or 3 overall in one line and just skip the number 4, but I don't know if that's
Right.
maybe.
That's a good point.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, I was saying maybe we could get rid of 4 and just say if you, fail to send someone or attend 2 consecutive or 3 meetings year round or
Oh,
throughout the
okay.
year, just to make it
Make
one
it all
line, so
one
that it's not 2
paragraph.
separate things to make it seem more confusing.
Yes, that makes sense.
In other words, combine 3 and 4.
Yep,
Right.
yep.
Like that.
Is that okay, Andrew? Does that sound?
Yeah, I also wanted to say that I really appreciate the framing at the beginning as this is not about this is not for the sake of the CTAC itself. This is for the sake of the organizations and localities being represented because it is unfair to these groups that we're trying to have represented if their members are not attending these meetings. This is about making sure that they get represented, and so I think that we should keep that framing.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, this is interesting, because again, we have the same problem in our committees and, like I just got to talk from one of the heads of our committee for our parks people. And one is really, really committed and my other person has not been showing up and so I reached out to him, I said, and so he's going through a job change and hasn't, because he was really good to begin with, and then all of a sudden he started. So I think that it's something that's
Right.
very, but it's a common problem, and I mean, I think when you commit to doing something like this, life does happen, and so yes, we have to do some change, check-ins and.
Jessica, do you all have a similar,
We do not, and so that's something that maybe we need to look at, and maybe that would incentivize, and that's why I'm very interested in this, that maybe it would, increase participation, and get better outcomes. So.
I think I'll share just from a staff perspective, having something like this that isn't, I think that this leaves a lot of forgiveness for people living lives
Yeah.
that are whole and sometimes complicated. At the same time, it gives staff a place to start from,
Yeah.
because it's hard.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this in the last meeting. It's a little bit hard sometimes as staff to come across appropriately sometimes, we can say things like, I've missed seeing you, but it's hard to go
Wink,
past
wink,
that,
kind
to
of.
be quite honest. Yeah, because, you don't want to, make somebody feel bad because
Yeah.
they've got real things that might be impeding their ability. But it's always easier if the expectation's set up front,
Yes.
because then you can have a conversation about it as opposed to it feeling squishy.
Well,
I think
maybe,
we also.
you know what, maybe in here also, if, and maybe that's too, but maybe we address it and say, we don't wanna be bossy about this stuff, but I mean, like, if you have extenuating circumstances that have come up, please talk to us ahead of time so we can avoid those conversations
Mhm.
also, I mean.
I think that could be handled in onboarding. That's a great way to
Yeah,
preface,
yeah.
this information. When
Yeah.
we strive to do an onboarding with anybody that's joining the organization, and so that
We're
can
not
be
trying to
part of.
micromanage, we just want, it would be great for you to
Yeah.
communicate, if you're having a personal situation that might be affecting your.
Well, I
Which
think
is
that's
like
why
number
it's
two.
important that we put the, it may trigger a conversation between
Yeah.
staff, because it may be that somebody's going through something temporarily.
Yeah.
And misses 2 meetings in a row. In that case, we would not, contact their agency
Yeah.
and discuss a different representative.
Yeah.
And I think this is a question to the group, does it go without saying that staff will hold that information with the appropriate confidentiality, to be respectful of the individual? Okay.
No.
Well, if I'm hearing correctly, we can do some work to combine the 3 and 4.
Yeah.
But that's the significant change there, and this would be ready to go as well on the April 3rd.
I think so.
My thought is
From
like the conversation we're just having, if we wanted to say something, make it a little bit more human, if you
Yeah.
wanna think of it that
Yeah.
way, you could just add it to number 2. Because there's already like a request for the member to communicate to staff.
Yeah.
And so it could be very simple, something
so
like.
what are you suggesting there, Stephanie?
Just think, I mean, if you foresee something upcoming or you're having a,
A crisis
a
occurs
crisis or even like if you're going out of town or something, I think clear communication is greatly appreciated to avoid us having to, have conversations
Follow up
with you,
with,
yeah,
right.
so
We encourage.
be
that.
proactive and not,
Right.
I think
Okay.
just something like that.
We could add another
Okay.
line in
We
number
understand,
2.
like,
Right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
please just keep it,
Yeah.
let us know.
Okay, we can work on that.
Should there
together.
be language of like, should it be prior to meeting start? Or can they communicate post meeting?
I think we could say something like advance notice is
Right.
appreciated, but
Yeah.
we understand it's not always possible.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
even a
Yeah,
soft,
that's a good one.
nothing enforceable, that'd be fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
just to set that
I
tone.
just,
Yeah.
technically you could email 6 months later and be like, hey,
Right.
I couldn't make it.
Yeah.
Don't kick me off.
I don't think that's gonna be the level of,
What if we just said timely notice?
it's all fine,
Fine, timely.
Okay.
whichever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Before the start
Yeah,
of the meeting.
that's a very
Yes,
broad
right.
interpretation.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think I I
Yeah.
appreciate that spirit that you said
Yeah.
earlier. I mean, we can put this into place and see how it goes
Yeah,
and if
absolutely.
anything can be revised
Yep.
going forward. Yeah. So same question to the group from a presentation perspective. How would you like to, now that we've got both of these products, any insight on sequence and how this should be presented in context with the other?
I think together, or one consecutive after each other, because they are definitely,
They connect.
They're
Connected,
connected.
yeah. yeah,
I mean, if you're already there.
Yeah.
Doing one of them.
yeah, you might as well just do the
So-
other one.
So the
Yeah.
same,
Yeah,
okay,
I think so.
all right.
And just
I
say
think
that,
oh, sorry.
I think if we bring them up, we can just bring them up together and
Right.
say, and I'll address it and say, we have this policy that we've created as well as the accountability aspect of it, and Ken's gonna go over all the
Right.
minutia of that, but before we approve it, but I think that that's easily addressed.
I think the
because they
attendance
are
policy answers questions raised by the first policy. So
Yeah.
I agree fully. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I see the honorarium policy first.
First.
Yeah.
and the-
yep,
Right.
yep,
Great.
Yeah.
So in the spirit of that, one thing that I remember, Reverend Hathaway, you mentioning at a previous meeting is, this needs to be something that's sustainable. And so, I want to just say to you that we've done some, projecting. So if we had, and Janice, this is thanks to you for putting this together. So if we had a full roster and every member and alternate attended
Which
based
is
on
the
6 meetings a year, that's 40 meetings. So
Yeah.
we just wanted to put this so that you all can say with certainty, you've done your due diligence from
Yeah.
a financial fiscal impact. So $50 a meeting, 40 meetings, that's $2,000. Total for 6 meetings a year, that's $12,000.
Where are
just
we
wanted
getting
to-
40 meetings from?
40 people, so if every seat on the CTAC and their alternate. So
Okay.
it's-
We're talking about fiscal.
which is not
Yeah.
happening
Fiscal.
either.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not happening.
And yeah, and I mean, she put together all these, she actually, Janice put together 6 scenarios. We just picked the most expensive
So your
scenarios.
maximum financial.
Yeah,
Financial.
maximum, yeah.
Yeah.
The current average attendance, just so that you're aware, which is a combination of, and you can see this as evidence here of, member and alternate is 15. So the fiscal impact of that is $4,800 over
Yeah,
over a
yeah.
Yes.
12-month cycle. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's some variability here, minimum, average to maximum, but we felt like from a budgetary perspective, that $12,000 a year is what we will.
And so this will be
That's good.
emailed out to all the people that are currently assigned, so they are then given the information and see if the carrot dangling
Right.
gets them
Yeah.
to increase the.
So I think I think that's a good point. I mean, we're talking in the near term about getting this to the stage of approval. If approved, it would go into effect. I think our recommendation would be it would go into effect July 1 with the new fiscal year, both the attendance and the compensation.
Yes.
And so then that would create an opportunity for us to have that conversation with everybody.
Yeah.
Even those that aren't able to make that next scheduled CTAC meeting, to be able to set that, and that might be a trigger in some cases to say, oh, wow, this is a responsibility that I really can't do, or, oh, wow, I'm ready to re-up and I'm good to go. And so we could set that going,
Okay.
Yeah,
I just want everybody to be aware of it,
Yes.
going
Right.
forward,
Right,
when it
right.
goes into place, just so that,
And with maybe some advance notice
Yeah.
too, so that they can prepare.
especially some of the smaller agencies that like you guys,
Yeah.
that need the dollars, it would definitely be beneficial for them.
so to that end, that's actually a good point. I mean, given the fact that, we do have this stipulation, I mean, if the policy goes into effect July 1, do you want to give a quarter grace period for the attendance, just so that off the top of my head, I don't remember
I
when
don't
the
think we
first
should,
CTAC
because
meeting
that's
of
gonna
the.
throw off our
Okay,
our pilot of showing what,
Well-
what the, you know, effectiveness is of
if
it.
the
you know?
policy board adopts this on May eighth, we have time between May eighth
Yeah.
and July
Oh,
1 to
okay.
communicate, so
Okay.
we could use that window of time to proactively communicate.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
And it's about to be
And say, this will
talked
start
about
July 1
in
and
April, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly.
we want to give you plenty of time to prepare
that's
your community, your members.
Right.
Because this will be starting July 1 and you'll be accountable to these policies. Yeah.
Excellent.
Any, yeah,
I didn't, I just wanted to put that in my notes. I was responding to a message. Are we saying? I just didn't get that. We're gonna put it in effect in July, but
well,
we
the
will.
policy board is slated to consider adoption of this, of these two policies on their May eighth meeting.
Mhm.
So if they approve them, we would have between May eighth and July 1
I
to
know,
communicate
I know, me too.
the new,
I'm gonna go there, yeah.
the new rules, the new program. So I'm looking at the agenda item 2. It looks like we've made our way through A, B, C, and D. With D, understanding that that's really a future phase once we move our way through the pilot. So we don't have a recommended policy for you today on compensation on specific engagement activities.
Right.
So that's the flag for us that that's a phase, future phase, but
Yeah.
not an item for today to review, right?
Yes.
Okay. So if we're ready, we can move on to item 3. This is really, again, where we wanted to feed that item 2D and get a better handle on, our current engagement efforts and our approach and sort of, I think, plans going forward. And I'll just preface that I think, at the risk of over subscribing you, Kristen, maybe everybody keep in mind because we've been doing this intense work with you all, what needs to be summarized and repeated to the full group. You all have had the benefit over the last several, 2 months now to be able to dial into this conversation directly. So, I don't really want Kristen to have to give the same entire presentation again to a bigger group of people, but what would be helpful for them to hear maybe in summary form. So Kristen, thank you.
Yeah, so in your packets, you're gonna see a couple of different pieces, and I wanna share just how they're related and how different they are. The first horizontal timeline is something that reflects the entire 2-year process of the long range transportation plan update, and you'll see that it's really calls out where the formal public engagement, where that formal period of 15 days exists in each phase. But it also speaks to the strategies and tools for engagement that we generate or organize that are a little bit different. You'll see that currently we are in our visioning and identifying needs phase, and those are actually together, the way we talk about that with people. So you'll see that sort of March deadline and then an April deadline. So it's really started last fall and lines up at the end of next month, where it's what are think big and tell us all the things. And then we'll move into the next phase where you'll see again, we're planning to be engaged in the community, but there's also the public comment when the universe of projects that kind of comes out of some of that visioning happens. And then you can again see the time frame. There's sort of a section that describes what should be happening and what will be happening during that time. And then of course that formal public review. So if you look at next year around this time, which is really important for even when we're talking to people, but the scope of this project is not something that, it's just a few months and we're wrapping up and then there's a report. It's an ongoing conversation with the community, in other words. So prioritizing the investments, that would be that touch point 2. I'm sorry, I didn't mention the first one. So where we have designed to go out in the community and return then with some groups so that they would not only be sort of educated about the LRGP in the process, then we'd say we'd like to come back and talk to you about, here's what these universal projects are and what do you see needs to be prioritized for investment. So it's no longer a visioning, an idea and tell us all the things you would want, but respond to and take a look at. And you'll see there's another down at the bottom of that page presenting the plan, touch point 3. So we sort of thought about it as of course, there's ongoing constant opportunities for people to give feedback at each phase. but returning, and you'll see there's even a mention of, in the presenting the plan, open house, something where people would be invited to come and sort of look at the plan. It's no longer a time for tweaks and changes and ideas, but presenting and again, getting people the feedback. So that's the scope of the LRTP engagement in a large view. If we zoom in a little bit, the next document is really talking more about sort of what the numbers look like currently in this first phase. So the table at the top, you know, we've completed 26 engagements across the region at this point, and 11 are scheduled. So we have statuses that change from in progress, working, to booked, to completed, and that's the internal side of how we track. In progress is included in, you know, on our tables behind the scenes, we have sort of potential and in progress together. So if we're in conversation with someone and it may not be something booked, that's really important for us to help identify even where we might be stuck. So you'll see there's about 21 that are not necessarily scheduled, but they're conversations. And I think that the other really important number is that out of the 26 events we've had, you know, we track the numbers, and so 1,248 people have had an opportunity to hear from us. It does not reflect the numbers that have maybe completed a survey or something tangible in that way, but you know, if you present and there are 48 people and they're all hearing you talk about this process and the opportunity and receiving, we count that as having been engaged. And again, this document talks about the different levels. So any questions about that timeline or anything? Very briefly, whatever.
And Kristen, you've got a list of these in the following page.
Yeah, I'll get to that.
I was just gonna
Just about that
just
timeline.
ask that, you know, you maybe give some examples, but you've already got it all
Yeah, yeah.
nicely summarized in the following
Yeah.
page.
So this is you know, I included sort of an executive summary report, and you know, at the risk of giving you too much text to read, I do think it's important to hear some of our thinking. So, you know, the idea is to be inclusive in our outreach and to really focus on broad participation and then a little bit more meaningful participation in the sense that there's a higher touch. So you'll see that language in there of like high touch engagement. Really, it takes potentially more time. It has maybe a few conversations that have to take place. It may even be some meetings just to introduce and, you know, with no necessarily, you know, a guaranteed outcome, right? You know, you're just engaging with an organization. So I'll mention in that broad versus targeted approach paragraph, I've put in the term universal design. So that actually comes from architecture. Many of you may be aware. In education, that's been used to talk about universal design for learning. And so, you know, I guess we've sort of adopted that as a universal design for engagement, and that you really are designing to make sure that the things that you present and the way that you engage in the community thinks about the needs of potentially the most vulnerable, or at a reading level that does not become inaccessible for people. Everyone at above a fourth grade reading level would have no trouble with the documents that are at a fourth grade level. I mean, newspapers are noted to be written about 6th or 7th grade, and for accessibility. And so if you think with those types of access points in mind, you're really designing universally. And when you think about events that would need ASL interpretation, for example, or to make sure that you have print materials in large print so that folks can really see the document, that you make sure your document isn't so small that folks who don't you know, have low vision would not be able to read it. We really, I think, are approaching from that standpoint of a universal design for engagement. We keep going through that just to touch on a couple of things. Our strategic pillars, I think there are probably others that we could talk about, but just these three listed, the identifying, engaging, underrepresented, and limited access groups. So that's not a term, limited access, that, you know, it's in capitals, because we sort of talked about it here as a lot of times you hear the word hard to engage. And I think we sort of flip the script on that a little bit, that it sort of describes someone as being hard to serve or hard to engage. And I think our thinking about that is more that there may be more limited access to those folks. And I've mentioned that, I think, in a previous meeting. And so how do we break down some of the barriers to gain access and not think of them as being hard in some sort of way? And that speaks to being in the community where people are, or designing something that really speaks to the folks. And I know you all have been talking very much about that in this policy discussion. And then the in-person, even with some education involved, personalized engagement opportunities. I'll give you an example of that, which I did in the later part of this document. There will be a youth homeschool co-op group of teenagers coming to do a field trip with us. And the idea, you know, here at Plan RDA, with the idea of that being a listening session, with the idea of them learning more about what a planning organization for the region does, but obviously with an activity where they're giving us feedback on transportation and how that affects their lives and what they would like to see. And so you think about the youth voice and kind of personalizing with a little bit of a lesson or an engagement that, you know, they're coming from an academic group. It's like, you know, well, how can we also talk about what it means to use public transportation if they've never done that, and have maybe a partner come in? I will not say that anyone in this room is committed to doing that yet, but bringing someone in who actually then would be able to continue to engage them on the ground, whereas we are not really positioned to do that, to continue leading lessons and activities with youth. And I think that's an example of, you know, it was their idea really to have a field trip, right? They're thinking of it. So personalizing something where we're available, we're convening people here, we're using the facility, but that isn't something that we would have on a standard list that someone could choose a lesson plan, and that we're very nimble in that way. If you keep going through, you'll see that for that bullet point number 1, identifying and engaging with groups with limited access, you'll see a descriptor there, but the 45 concept, which I know I mentioned before, was really mathematical at a minimum, right? It was like 9 localities, 5 organizations that are reaching folks that would help us. And so that name is sticking, and it's kind of internally representing, you know, like a baseball to the 45. And that's grown to be over 160 contacts and over 100 organizations. Some of those you'll see represented in the engagements below, in the following pages. And the targeted outreach, for example, I have a meeting set up to talk with someone at Offender Aid and Restoration, OAR. You know, that's a population of folks re-entering society after incarceration that I think, you know, I wouldn't say that I know that we definitely have that as a constituent group, or, you know, and they're citizens, they're residents, they are in the community, but they have an additional, I would say, you know, a need or special circumstances that, you know, how do we engage meaningfully with that group? What does that look like? What are the kinds of things we need to think about and talk about? What are some of the barriers that they have that are different from, you know, folks in the general population? So that conversation is really to build a relationship, no different from some of the work we're doing with DARS or the Virginia Department for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. The last section, I'll just say about accessible and audience specific messaging. I put something in front of you today as an example of, tomorrow we're going to be at the Teen Summit, which is a regional teen gathering. It is sold out. My son could not even get in. I mean, I was on the, you know, then they thought they would extend it. So first it was 750 teens. It is 850 teens. So like, I mean, that's like a concert. First of all, I hope that they're ready. And it's all day, it's leadership, it's about branding. You know, you there. We're very fortunate to have a tabling, a booth. But that youth voice, so the messaging to youth, you'll notice that if you even were to put, I should have put 2 examples in front of you, the little handbills that we use with QR codes and things like that. The language here on this current one, let me actually, I would not go to a board of supervisors meeting and say that the long-term engagement plan would be, now if you're able, tell us how transportation affects you. That's a very distilled, I took off the long-range transportation plan language from that document. They have certain times when they're coming through their 9th to 12th grade. I want them to immediately see the message of like, how does transportation affect you? I have a 16-year-old. I know exactly what he would be talking about. My mom won't get me a car if I had a car, you know. But I live in a rural, a ruralish place. So he would probably talk about sidewalk access to the library, or how we live less than a mile away from his job and he needs to be driven because there's not a way for him to safely walk. And so I think yeah, they have plenty of things to say. It's really about breaking down the barrier for them to see what it is. So even the natural resources plan, I didn't, you know, care about the natural environment. You know, it's an abbreviated like I'm competing with TikTok and everything else to get their attention. So while I do not have the funds to give away a lot of beautiful, fun tchotchkes, right? Because we're fiscal stewards. These teens are coming with this added leadership, engagement, visioning. So the whole day we'll be talking to them. We benefit from being inside that event. So it's important for us to know what's on the horizon and to then tailor what we're saying and what we're doing. And I know you're all aware of how to do messaging. Even just the SEDS, right? I wanted to figure out how can we make a song about the SEDS, because comprehensive economic development strategy, and what would you have to say? Currently, we have 0 responses from under 18-year-olds on the SED survey, and you probably know why. But I have a goal to change that. I think that they do have something to say about the future, their future opportunity in this region, should they choose to stay here. One of the questions is, all right, have you considered leaving the area? I am sure that a lot of them have considered, I want to get out for whatever reason. Maybe we need to know more about why they're saying that. So, tailoring messaging may mean that you would not take this piece of collateral to a different event, and it means that there is a lot more work on staff to develop multiple versions of sort of the same thing. But I think that's just the work that we signed on for, because the community is that multiple, has that kind of diversity. Translation, for example, having surveys in paper, you might be surprised, but people like a paper survey. I know we have this beautiful tool, they see the slides, it's wonderful. But even last night, I was at a town council community meeting, and the paper surveys were exactly what people did. I gave out the handbills with the QR code, but so old school still floats. And there were Spanish speaking individuals there, and they all filled out the paper survey. I saw some children helping out older parents. It was really, I didn't take pictures, privacy. But I could see that there was an engagement point there where they were even discussing some of the questions, which, that's an amazing thing that we offer. Yes, sorry.
Have you tested this out on your 16-year-old? The SEDS survey?
No, because he is a baseball player and there's no talking to him these days. But I did ask him to do the transportation one, and he did, and he also did the rural transportation one. Again, there was something a little more, how do you talk about economic development to teens, even though they're taking economic and personal finance, and so we should really go through all the economic and personal finance teachers and say, get your students into the survey. Yeah, I should bring him as a type.
No, I mean, interesting just to think like, why do the youth want to leave, right? And then from that, there could be programs that like go into the schools to talk about and hit those points, which I think is.
Yeah, and as someone who used to work in K-12 education, working with educators, coming into schools is not as easy as you would think. Getting access to students and even teachers is harder these days, and understandably so. But yeah, this kind of event, and there are actually several teen summit events happening in the region currently. So that's cool. Our goal is to see how we can be present and then take advantage of something where there's a lot of infrastructure.
I currently have a high school student extern. I'll take this to her and see if she's one of those overachievers. She'll probably do it.
And we want the kids who aren't paying attention, how can we turn their heads that this could be? So we'll have some giveaways and things like that. I'll just go on to the next page if you want to think about where we've been, where we're headed. This is always a call to anyone in the room to think about, I could really help you get in front of these folks. And I'm just gonna say, if you can help us get in front of, because when you get an email from someone you don't know and we need to be doing that and requesting and asking, but we also need, that door open. So you'll see that there's a Chesterfield triad on the possibility. I'd draw your attention to the potentials list. There's one in New Kent as well. I met at a fantastic, and my own Hanover has a triad, and that's a partnership between seniors and the police department. And so this amazing community member, I was at a Hanover Senior Expo, and it's like they're, I don't know what it is. They have a fantastic relationship, the office, the sheriff in charge. And so going to that in my own backyard, right, that's easier. I live down the street where it meets, but sending emails and you're kind of unknown. So it really does help to say, you can even send an email just connecting myself or Holly. Would it be okay for them to come and speak to folks who are gathering. Any questions about this list at all, or?
So I happen to be good friends with Elijah Lee. I don't know if anybody knows who he is. He's very, very active, young, youth, and he's actually does an annual thing in Monroe Park. He's superpower activist. I don't know if maybe I could give him some of this stuff. I mean, if you want to work on.
And now through April is that first, remember the first touch point, the first time where we're really sort of going all over. Which isn't the same thing as the formal, it's open for 15 days.
Yeah.
We wanna come and spend time, absolutely, so
I'm just
between
saying
now
if
and the
he-
end of April.
You're looking for younger, you know, and he goes to Maggie Walker too. So I mean, that would be, those are usually some more engaged kids also, I think.
Yeah, please do, please do.
Yeah.
The last few pages are just what we've more recently taken out when we do have the opportunity to do a presentation. We were sort of leaning again away from doing presentations at community events and more touching, you know, hand and really conversational. But sometimes we'll be asked if we went to a Board of Supervisors meeting and had our CTAC member, Sarah Erickson, actually do the presentation. And so while we weren't sure about maybe connectivity to get on the site, the Engage site, we have some screenshots and those were also presented at the symposium. You know, so show people what it looks like. Last night was showing people on my phone. That tool is an incredible 24/7 on-demand translatable. It really undergirds, I think, all of the work that we can do across all these programs with broad engagement. But people need to be shown that if they aren't naturally thinking about it. We created some foam boards. I took those to a community meeting where most of the attendees were 55 plus. And I think even that, just the feeling that we had these blown up, which we didn't make for that meeting, but I think we're just trying to be as nimble as possible. So any way that you know, we'll tailor some of the materials to meet whatever group that is. And I guess the last thing would just be, the engagement in a box, which is mentioned somewhere about ambassadors kind of going out. We definitely think of that as our CTAC members. There isn't an actual sort of box that you pick up, although we could do that. It's really a conversation, meaning like you're gonna have what you need and potentially if we need to come with you. But again, I want you to be thinking that we can develop what is needed for that group, but we do have some standard things in there located typically in the toolkit for people to download and share on internet, so. That kind of a good, and I guess the compensation related pieces, yes, I again think that we might. I would even say potentially if there were gonna be something, if something comes out of this meeting with OAR, that potentially would be a perfect place to say, well, what, if I could in that conversation, say there's the potential for compensation, let's talk about what that would look like. I could see it changing the meeting potentially, because of that member thinking about their clients and what might be a good incentive. So just think of it as, you know, one of the things we want to be able to develop here, but not keeping us from doing engagement.
So how lucky are we?
Yeah.
Awesome. I want to just like put a little bit of color and Ken, you can probably help me with this. It was, I mean, so we're, you know, long range transportation plans, a 2-year planning process, a very intense effort for our agency. I remember I've been with Plan RVA for, this is my 10th year. So we were early in, I was new in my tenure with Plan RVA when we were undergoing a long range transportation plan update, you know, 10 years ago. 8 years ago, I guess it was. And I remember being in our old office and talking about our outreach efforts. And I think we had over the 2-year period, something like 5 meetings out across the region. So, I mean, I look at the statistics and I just think about how far we've come. And because of the capacity that the board has invested in to be able to develop this, to have, you know, real professionals in the space that think about this and like wake up literally every day thinking about it, we're really, really lucky. So thank you. And, it shows in the value of the input that we're collecting, that we're reaching more people and more people are excited about thinking about the future. If I can ask you a question and then maybe we can get a little bit of feedback, and I know we're sort of time-wise. Talk a little bit about, you've given a really great overview of the LRTP. You mentioned that we have these other 2 in March engagement efforts, but the agency has evolved to the point where we don't just have one planning effort underway every 2 years. We have multiple planning efforts. And so maybe just for the benefit of the committee, talk about how you think about that piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for those comments. I'm glad that, there was an investment. The board created this position. It's not, that I'm volunteering and hoping for some honorarium, get paid to do this work.
Yes.
I think this is a unique situation as far as I understand, that I've been here 6 months, so I don't have the benefit of knowing, it goes in cycles. This time that we have these 3 open surveys, is pretty unique. The challenge there is also that you can overwhelm people with the amount of things that you want them to do. So I'll just say, there are some events where we are specifically choosing to go because it leans more towards a survey, and that the people in that room would automatically, so for example, a climate conversation, we definitely were there and took the natural resources plan. So I think you have to create something like there's 3 opportunities right now. It's wonderful that, the LRTP had a longer period. And I think we can expect less participation if the period is 1 month. So we manage our expectations around what might be possible. But I think the intersectionality of talking about, that word is like a big one, but really, how do all these things fit together? Certainly, if we're caring about the natural resources, you can immediately make a segue over to transportation and how those 2 things are connected. And I think that is, again, our job to try to help people make some of those connections and not see it as these 3 separate asks. They all fold in. If people are wanting to leave the region, like we're asking in the comprehensive economic development SEDS, well, what are some of those reasons? Is it because, you can't get around the city very easily, and I'd rather live somewhere where there's a subway. I just want to be able to jump on and have my pass. And so I think that, again, we're listening and learning, but the numbers of completed surveys don't always reflect the real work happening on building relationships. So again, managing expectations about what's possible. I think Plan RVA hopefully will become more synonymous with, bringing it all together in people's minds. We still have, I think, a ways to go with brand recognition amongst people who don't already understand that there is even regional planning happening at all. You don't know how many times people just say, "What, really?" So I've drunk the Kool-Aid, so now I know, but before I got this job, as I said, what I did not, I was just like mouth open.
So the other morning at the GRP thing, I was talking to some of the Ernst & Young people, and they're just like, why don't we have like an organization that gets all of the, regional partners together? I'm just like, well, you see that person over there? Plan RBA, that's it. And they had no idea. So I just think that
I feel like we hear a lot from our stakeholders and partners, just even over the last couple of years with these events that we've hosted, even people who have been longtime partners with us, they're like, you're like this elephant and I was only touching this one part, and so really, I think the work that you're doing is exciting in that regard, because the way that you're weaving together the nature of this state of being overwhelmed right now with the number of planning efforts that we have going on is actually in some regards a blessing, right? Because we're able to talk about these things that need to move forward in the community from the lens that someone cares about. So Kristen, as you heard, she's making that connection and helping to draw out, the natural resources plan is where we're going to be able to pencil in the vision and strategy for where our greenways are going to go across the community. That is a mode of transportation, and so really being able to tie this together, thinking about, how do we leverage our transportation infrastructure to prevent against a brain drain? There's like so many ways that this can become integrated. And so it's just, I'm in awe every time I hear you talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
So I know we're at time. I'm gonna also name, I can hear the lunch. Apologies, we just had a delay in the delivery, but we've got lunch here. We are here, we want to continue to talk, but I know we're over the time that we had booked in your calendar today. So it felt like this was important to make sure that you heard the whole set of remarks that Kristen had prepared.
I have some time, but I don't know if
I can finish the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I need to.
Any questions or feedback, comments for Kristen? I mean,
Comments.
no, thank you, Kristen. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you're gonna give this presentation again, April 3rd?
I think that's a question for the group. I mean, I want to be respectful of your time. I'm interested in the fact that you did put time and energy to put this material together. Do you see value to share this with your colleagues that sit on those committees?
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I think it's good for everyone to know just how much work you're putting in
Right.
to making that
Yeah,
elephant
and maybe
be
you can
seen.
shame my fellow Chesterfield people that.
So let's talk
are
about
doing
the
as
right
many
way to
things in there.
do that. Okay,
Sorry if we just threw more work. on
thank you.
Okay.
So, Stephanie, as you're moving your way, maybe just glacially walk, I just want to alert you all, we have this really interesting opportunity. Our next meeting is scheduled for, of course, we have the April 3rd, meeting, but then the next work group meeting is scheduled for April 25th. And so we have a little bit of a break, kind of a high, am I right about that? So April 3rd is the next time we'll see each other, but we'll be with that bigger joint group. And then the next time the work group gets together, and this should already be on your calendar, is April 25th. The purpose of that meeting will be to do any debriefing that we need to do, from the items already discussed, but then also to dive really in earnest into the Title VI plan.
Okay.
This is the plan that the agency already has that we want to update. It's a plan adopted by both the commission and the TPO, so again, it's a joint work effort. For how we will comply with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. A great opportunity in this moment is that we were just notified a week or so ago that, the State Department of Transportation will be initiating their monitoring review of our Title VI compliance beginning April 10th. So I won't have the results of that
Right.
review by April 25th, but I will have, some more information. And so that'll be good grounding to really be able to bring full circle the plan and then how we're monitored. So I just wanted to kind of give you that information and insight. And then our plan is that the work group will continue through its process, whatever that needs to be, to get the Title VI plan ready for recommendation for any updates that are necessary, if necessary. And then if those updates are necessary, we would be looking to present those to the policy board and commission in the August to September timeframe. So we've built in time because we know we're headed into summer and schedules get a little bit difficult and everything. So we wanted to make sure we're thoughtful about that. So that's kind of the trajectory for right now. And that's all I wanted to tell you. So.
In 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so we
Okay.
might, after April 3rd, I will say, but maybe between the 3rd and the next time we get together, we could send some information out to you from the title, our existing Title VI plan, just I can send you the material. It'll be a desk review that starts on April 10th. So sometime between April 10th and the meeting, I'll get communication from the state DOT that says, please submit to us the following. I'd be happy to provide that information to you all, just so you can get a feel for kind of what the process looks like. So. Any questions or other comments, concerns? So lunch is in the kitchen. Thank you all so much for the extra time. We appreciate it. Andrew, thinking of you and with you as today and through the weekend.
I appreciate that. And thank you all for accommodating virtually.
I'm fighting the urge to want to give you a mom hug. I'm sorry right now.
No worries.
Well, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes,
Appreciate
thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Have a
Thank you,
great
everyone.
weekend.
Thank you.